Hello, I'm Sarah Housden from the University of East Anglia, where I work in the School of Health Sciences. This video is about diversity and inclusion in dementia care. Within this video, we'll be exploring key issues around diversity and inclusion in the provision of support services for people living with dementia, so that by the end of the video, you should be able to describe why recognising, respecting and responding to diversity is a key aspect of person-centred dementia care. And you should also be able to identify ways of working that can potentially improve the quality of life of people from diverse backgrounds and marginalised groups. We'd also like you to be able to apply this learning to scenarios including people living with dementia who are lesbian, gay or bisexual or transgender, as well as those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds in the UK. So what do we mean by terminology such as people from diverse backgrounds and marginalised groups? Firstly, we mean people with different backgrounds compared to the majority population in any particular location, whose specific care and support needs may be hidden. And secondly, we're talking about people who are marginalised, meaning their voices are seldom heard due to social stigma, prejudice and discrimination, and who may experience disempowerment across the lifespan. So that includes people who are marginalised in the UK and are living with dementia who might also be Black, Asian or from a minority ethnic background, who may have long-term memories of another culture or way of life which may have become dominant in their everyday patterns of living and speaking if their memory from the more recent past fades. It could be people who are deaf and those whose first language is a sign language, or someone who has a lifelong learning disability, serious mental health related illness, or physical disabilities or impairments. Or it could be someone who's gay, lesbian, bisexual or transgender, or who doesn't identify as cisgender or heterosexual for other reasons. They're just examples of people that we're talking about when we're talking about diverse populations. There are others as well. But understanding the needs of people from marginalised or minority backgrounds matters because planning of person-centred care depends on knowing individual needs and preferences and having an insight into people's backgrounds. Delivering culturally informed, safe and competent care depends on awareness, understanding and sensitivity towards people whose backgrounds are different from our own. And unmet needs can lead to stress and distress for the person living with dementia, which can contribute to wrong assumptions being made about an individual being challenging in some way. So recognising diversity across the lifespan can support understanding of the interaction between the past, the present and the person, and how this shows itself in the way the person acts and speaks in the present. So when we refer to culture, we're talking about the body of learned beliefs, traditions, principles and guidelines for behaviour that are commonly shared among members of a particular group. Culture serves as a roadmap for both perceiving and interacting with the world. However, most elements of culture are below the surface and are not initially visible to onlookers. It's like the bulk of an iceberg is actually beneath the surface of the sea. So we only see a small island of ice, but underneath that, there's much more. So aspects of culture which might easily be seen include things like how people dress, what they eat, the language they speak, and the special occasions they celebrate. But below the surface, there are many more factors which are influenced by and which influence culture, such as family values, concepts of cleanliness, child rearing practices, and gender roles. These things might be missed by someone who is not fully aware or competent in interacting with people from that culture. So it is essential to keep in mind that there will always be areas of which you are not aware that can be culturally important to individuals living with dementia. So culture can be expressed through things like customs or rituals and related to different stages of life and everyday activities. It can be expressed through worship, religion and spiritual beliefs, through language and intonations of language, through diet, art and music, humour, education, and the sort of activities they participate in regularly. Clothing is also part of culture, as is attitude to dirt and cleanliness. And we've mentioned approach to child rearing too. But hierarchies in families and communities may not be so obvious, and neither are gender roles necessarily. So a person's cultural expression is not necessarily related to their place of birth, but could be observed in a variety of ways. Culture can be a way of life for some individuals or groups in terms of their behaviours, beliefs, values and attitudes. In its broadest sense, it can be linked to a person's heritage or their background. So another consideration with culture is that it can influence how we live, but it doesn't necessarily determine each individual's behaviour. People consist of a mixture of cultural background and their life experiences. So it's important to remember that culture is learned and passed on through generations, that it's integrated into all aspects of an individual's life, past, present and future, that it's dynamic and evolving, and it has huge diversity, and a number of subcultures and exceptions may exist. It's also important to remember that culture is not defined exclusively by ethnicity, but rather by a rich system of values, beliefs, history and learned patterns of behaviour. This system of beliefs, values and behaviours may also be influenced by variables such as gender, socio-economic class background, so that's whether somebody considers themselves to be a working man or woman or from an elite class, their disability, sexual orientation, age, faith and geographic factors such as differences between people born in the north and south of the country and how people live in urban and rural areas. So there can potentially be more differences between people of the same ethnic or cultural background than similarities. And while understanding the role and influence of culture is important, we must remember that perceptions of dementia itself can vary widely within cultures and between individuals. So practitioners must be careful not to make assumptions. So earlier I mentioned cultural awareness and cultural competence. What do these two terms mean? Cultural awareness means having sensitivity and understanding towards members of other ethnic groups, while cultural competency is the ability to function in different cultural contexts. As people providing care to people living with dementia, we need to be able to have a shared dialogue with those we support, as well as with their families and our local communities. Otherwise, we risk being culturally blind and unable to meet people's needs effectively. Cultural blindness, being colourblind, which is claiming not to see differences in race, culture and ethnicity, or treating everyone the same way, creates a one-size-fits-all approach and does not in any way represent person-centred care or equal opportunity. We need to ensure that we don't risk minimising the real differences and cultural contexts in which people conduct their lives, as these play an important role in promoting health and well-being. Related to cultural blindness is ethnocentrism. This is a tendency to use your own culture as the standard by which to judge and evaluate other cultures. In other words, taking an ethnocentric point of view means using your understanding of your own culture to decide what is normal. This can lead to biases and a tendency to view cultural differences in a negative light. It can also make it difficult to see how your own cultural background influences your behaviours.
You may have heard the term LGBT+ previously. It's an abbreviation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and more, including queer or questioning, intersex and asexual. You may have also heard of the term cisgender, which describes people whose gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth. If you would like more information on current terminologies, you can contact a local LGBT+ group, such as the Norfolk LGBT Project, who may be able to advise or offer further signposting. The contact details for the LGBT Norfolk Project can be found in the description.
So let's apply some of the above to practice by considering the case for LGBT people who are living with dementia. There are some key things to be aware of in the first instance, such as people in the past, due to the historical criminalisation and later medicalisation of same-sex attraction in the UK, may have married someone of the opposite sex to hide their sexuality. And people may remember hiding their sexuality or gender identity in their youth, or have frightening memories of being persecuted for being themselves. For people living with dementia, these memories and their emotional content can be stronger than more recent memories of diverse expressions of gender and identity being seen as socially acceptable. So families and friends don't always know everything about a person, or may be in denial about some aspects of their life. This can include sexual preferences and gender identity. So the following video is a discussion between two gay men who look back on the horror of conversion therapy as practiced in the past in the UK and in many countries throughout the world. As you watch this video, consider how a person living with dementia who is gay may feel about disclosing their sexuality in the cultural context of such a practice. The discriminatory way in which people from marginalised groups have been treated will have major implications for their well-being in the present. And if they're encouraged to talk about the past or to disclose their sexuality in a context of deteriorating memory for the recent past, this can leave people from socially stigmatised groups feeling afraid of what may happen to them as they become increasingly vulnerable in later life and in the context of progressive dementia.
I said to the doctor, I want out. I volunteered in, I want out. He said, no. First of all, we have to put the electrodes on your penis. If you get an erection over these men, then we will stop the erection by hitting you with a shock.
I think it was probably the cruelest torture that one did at the behest of the medical profession. Why did you actually originally admit yourself to a hospital to have this treatment?
From my mother. My mother never accepted me because she was from a different generation, and to think I'd let her down and I'd lied these lies. I did it for her. I did it because society told me I was a criminal and I was dirty and I was filthy and I was grubby and I wasn't normal.
Showing the picture of this naked man, then I would give him this apomorphine injection, which is an emetic, to make him sick. And the intention was, which of course is ludicrous, is that he would connect that with feeling absolutely dreadful. And then what I wasn't allowed to do, and this was the most difficult because it just felt so inhumane, was not to clean him up when he'd been sick or had an accident in the bed, which he did.
the world knew I was there. I
Right.
thought I'm never going to get out alive. That's all I was worried about. I wasn't worried about being cured.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get out alive.
Yeah.
Did you ever think aversion therapy would work?
I don't think I ever thought it would work. I remember thinking that evening, I don't think that man is going to not be gay because he's just been through that horrendous treatment. As a retired psychiatric nurse, a lot of one's practice is scary. 50 years ago, the doctor was law in the hospital. And if he said, you will do this treatment, your job was to do that treatment to the best of your ability. Now you might turn around and say, oh, get lost, I'm not doing it.
I've got to say, and I'm really getting upset now, I really mean this. Thank you for apologising. It means more than I think you'll ever know.
And as with all apologies, I can only thank you for the way that you accepted it. And it was meant in the most sincere manner. Brief encounter.
Other considerations with LGBT people is that they may no longer be in touch with, or they may have complicated relationships with, biological family, so care and support available to heterosexual people in similar circumstances of having dementia may not be available or acceptable to them. Memory problems may make it harder for people to remember what they have told others about their sexual orientation or gender identity. And LGBT people are a minority and a hidden one. So LGBT people living in formal care may feel they don't fit in because everyone else seems to be heterosexual and there may be no one else like them. They may feel that they are forced to change their lifestyle and that they have to keep quiet about their history, going back into the closet, in fact. An LGBT person with dementia may be cared for by someone who is not supportive of their identity, such as a child or sibling who is embarrassed by it. And for trans people, their body may not match their gender identity, making personal care especially difficult for them to accept. Within society, LGBT people with dementia may experience stigma because they are LGBT and stigma because they have dementia, a double stigma. Also, LGBT people constitute a very significant minority, around 5 to 7%. That's 1 in 16 people of the adult population in the UK. So assuming that people are heterosexual is common, and making assumptions about sexual orientation may not be intentional, but it can make some people feel excluded and isolated. The LGBT people you support might have had negative experiences coming out to services in the past. So when they've disclosed that they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or in other ways not cisgender, they have found that people have discriminated against them, and they therefore fear discrimination, not only from service providers, but from other service users. So now the important bit, what you can do about this. What can you do to make a difference for people? Firstly, respect individuals and respond to their needs as expressed in the moment. Avoid making assumptions relating to sexual orientation and gender identity, and remain person-centred when delivering care. That is, recognise the individual needs of LGBT people living with dementia, and create safe spaces to discuss sexual orientation, gender identity, and the coming out process. Recognising significant relationships, such as families of choice and same-sex partners, can make a huge difference to well-being, and using the preferred language of someone, for example, the correct pronouns if people declare them, and referring people to LGBT support groups, networks, and supportive resources where appropriate, as well as all of us needing to attend LGBT training and sharing our learning with our colleagues. I'm going to share a case study now about Edna. This is taken from a research project. So, service providers in a residential aged care facility shared the story of Edna, who had transitioned to female 40 years earlier. Prior to her admission, Edna was given an ultimatum by her son to present as male or never see her grandchildren again. Edna complied, and it was not until staff assisted her to shower that they became aware that she was actually a transgender woman. Edna was reliant on service providers to advocate on her behalf, and they were unsure how to challenge Edna's family and were also concerned that doing so would jeopardise her access to her grandchildren. As a consequence of her dementia, Edna lost the capacity to inform staff about her needs and was more vulnerable to the transphobic demands of her family. She was dependent on others who did not sufficiently understand her transgender needs, and she was incapable of self-advocacy. Edna's presentation as a male could be misread as an indication that her trans status was lost because she had dementia. But this wasn't the case. Rather, dementia had provided an opportunity for family members to reassert their own transphobic beliefs with devastating consequences for Edna's well-being. The next case study is of Carl and is drawn from my own practice. Carl is a new care home resident. Within 24 hours of his arrival, his daughter Sonia comes in saying that she had come to support the process of completing the admissions paperwork to the care home. As Carl has Alzheimer's disease, she gives her name and details as a person to contact in case of emergency, saying that while her mother, Carl's wife, was alive, she too was affected by cognitive impairment and therefore lacked capacity to act as next of kin. We always like to get a picture of the individual during their earlier lives, so spend some time filling in personal history and individual preference documents with Sonia. The main information gained is that Carl is a real family man, something that Sonia emphasises on 2 or 3 occasions during our conversation. An hour after Sonia leaves, Carl has another visitor, Terry. While Carl had seemed to be quite disengaged during Sonia's visit, at the sight of Terry walking through the door, he seems to come alive, looking into Terry's smiling face and reaching out a hand to take hold of his friend's arm. Something jogged a thought in the back of my mind, and I decided to ask Terry whether he would be able to help Carl with filling in some admissions paperwork. Readily agreeing, Terry gave his name and contact details, stating that he was Carl's long-term partner and that they had been together for 15 years. As I listened, it seemed that Carl had been afraid of being open about his sexual orientation in the 1950s and so had married Sonia's mother to hide being gay at a time when he would have been likely to have been given conversion therapy or otherwise persecuted had the truth been known. As the situation unfolded, with Terry's visits angering Sonia, who says that he robbed her of her father by manipulating Carl into a gay relationship, I'm uncertain what to do. So when Sonia arrives one day saying that she will remove Carl from the care home because we're not keeping Terry away, I wonder whether I'm doing the right thing in giving Carl's long-standing relationship with Terry space to continue. Is it right? And am I within my rights to stop Sonia from removing Carl, to stop him seeing Terry? Have I been too quick to discount Sonia's way of seeing things? And how can I be sure what Carl wants? Now, it's not always clear that there's a definite right answer in these situations. They're moral and ethical dilemmas which need to be discussed in the staff group. Being clear that there are no easy answers is probably the most important thing, and not to jump to conclusions about what would work best.
With these case studies, there are legal considerations to take into account, such as the Mental Capacity Act, lasting power of attorneys, safeguarding, and advocacy. More information on these can be found in our Dementia and Safeguarding Adults videos found in the Dementia video training playlist.
So now let's apply what we know about cultural diversity and inclusion to working with people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. Dementia does not discriminate. It affects people of all cultures and backgrounds. People's backgrounds and beliefs inform their sense of self, how they understand, feel about and respond to other people and their environment, including diagnoses, care organisations, and care and support staff. So there's an estimated 25,000 people in ethnic minority communities with dementia in the UK. There are varying experiences and care needs in each of these communities. While the number of white British people with dementia is expected to double by 2051, the numbers of people from ethnic minorities is expected to increase sevenfold by the same time. Although prevalence of dementia is higher in some ethnic minorities, they're also less likely to engage with dementia services. As symptoms of dementia develop, there can be a tendency for long-term memories to override short-term memories, and for people from ethnic minorities, this can take them back to a time when they were conversing solely in their first language, sometimes known as their mother tongue, and memories of their place of birth and other cultural experiences may begin to dominate. So some of the things we're aware of through speaking with people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups are that until barriers such as stigma, communication problems and discrimination are explored and resolved, ethnic minorities will continue to miss out on vital support. Cultural competence is something that is absolutely vital, and when it comes to effectively delivering high quality care, without it, there will be inevitably poorer patient and person outcomes and a lack of person satisfaction. To deliver culturally competent care means being more aware of one's own identity and how we may be perceived, but also approaching with an open mind, kindness and respect for all cultures and ethnicities. So culturally competent care and practice is more than just having the knowledge base around different cultures. It's the ability to meet social and cultural needs of the individual, regardless of their life and cultural experiences. So what can you do to provide the best support possible? Treat everyone as an individual and explore their specific needs with them. Understand different types of barriers individuals may face when accessing care, and provide services in different languages where these are needed and whenever possible. Understanding that a family's culture impacts their preferences around ethical issues is important, and holding open and honest conversations around the needs of minority and marginalised communities is essential to developing inclusive services. So as you move towards more inclusive services, things you can do to support this process include getting ideas from people with dementia, from their carers, and working with marginalised and minority communities, asking what they consider to be good ways for them to get involved. So there might be food and drink or social traditions associated with getting together, which you might want to integrate into your activity schedule to make it more welcoming and tuned in to people's needs. Also, find out about using interpreters who speak or sign in languages used in your local community. Finding out about religious and cultural occasions which might be relevant considerations. Avoid planning events, for example, which clash with times people are fasting. An equality impact assessment can help you check that you have considered the needs of a range of diverse groups. I'm now going to share the case study of Arif. In this case study, we hear about how Arif's well-being and the experience of his family were profoundly affected by a lack of awareness of dietary requirements associated with a religion with which members of the care team were unfamiliar. Arif is an Indian Muslim man with moderately advanced dementia who came to live in residential care due to needing increasing amounts of assistance with dressing, washing and eating and drinking. English was not his first language, and he had forgotten most of the language he has learnt since living in the UK. Whilst Arif is being assisted with a meal one lunchtime, a family member came to visit and noticed pork on his plate. They were seriously upset and angered by the incident and asked for an explanation, as Muslims must not, under any circumstances, eat pork. Unfortunately, the staff were unaware of dietary requirements associated with Arif's religious beliefs. The home managers met with the family to apologise, giving assurance that this would not happen again. The need to provide training to build awareness of different cultures and religions was recognised, and staff were reminded of the importance of finding out individual dietary requirements and ensuring this was clearly documented so that all staff were aware. In this final case study drawn from my own practice, we focus again on the impact of lack of understanding in relation to guidelines associated with the practice of a religion. Sheila is a sociable and popular resident in a fairly small care home. She has maintained this popularity and an enjoyment of being with people despite developing advanced expressive aphasia as part of dementia. Towards December, during her first year living in the care home, support staff noticed that Sheila becomes somewhat agitated and distressed when in the lounge and dining area. This distress increases as seasonal music is introduced at meal times in the run-up to Christmas. Sheila has no relatives and rarely has visitors, so it has been difficult to draw up a picture of her past. However, a member of staff notices that she has a New World Translation of the Bible amongst her personal possessions, and thereby, after some investigation, is able to guess that Sheila is likely to be a Jehovah's Witness who doesn't celebrate Christmas at all. Music at mealtimes is therefore returned to the usual easy listening classics, and discrete areas of the care home where Sheila likes to sit during the day are turned into Christmas-free zones, so that she is not excluded from socialising during December. Care staff soon notice that some other residents gravitate to the Christmas-free areas, and assumptions about the happiness associated with the Christmas season begin to be explored and questioned amongst the staff team. In bringing this video to an end, I would like to make 5 points about best practice in providing inclusive and diversity-aware dementia care. These are: don't make assumptions based on simplistic labelling. For example, don't assume that all people from a faith group are the same or have the same needs. Avoid unnecessary exclusionary practices, such as decorating all shared areas of a care home for Christmas or having Christmas-focused menu choices. Don't be afraid to ask or find out more if you don't know, and recognise the compounding effect of disadvantage with some types of difference. So this is known as intersectionality and applies, for example, where an individual may be from a specific ethnic background alongside having perhaps a long-standing disability and being gay, in addition to living with dementia. And lastly, everyone is an individual, which leads to the most important message underpinning all dementia practice, which is to always work with the person, not any diagnosis or other label that is attributed to them. The person always comes first.
Our question from providers for this session is: How can I best explain the many differences between people with dementia, which influence how they behave, and how best to support them?
In answering this, I'd like to refer to the work of Tom Kitwood, who is a social psychologist who was working in the UK, in Bradford, in the 1980s, 1990s, and who introduced the concept originally of person-centred dementia care. He said that the experience of living with dementia is made up not just of the actual neurological impairment or the dementia itself. In fact, we need to consider the changes taking place in the brain as interweaving with factors associated with personality, life history, physical and emotional health, and the interactions of care providers themselves with the person living with dementia, which Kitwood called social psychology. Now, to Kitwood's diagram, I would add how the expressions of all those factors will be influenced as well by the physical, sensory and social environment experienced by the person in any moment. So as well as the time of day or even the time of year where people are affected by low levels of natural light in the evenings or in the winter, add differences in cultural background to all of this, and you can see why it's essential to look at the person as an individual in the moment and to respond to needs they may be expressing at that time.
Thank you for watching. If you would like more information, please visit norfolk-and-suffolk-caresupport.co.uk, where you'll find further training on our learning portal. The link for this website is in the description down below.